Hello Horror Hounds, it's time for another look at one of the films of David Cronenberg. We're at 1999 and eXistenZ. We watched this a couple of days ago. My girlfriend didn't like it. She said nothing happens. It's a film that some reviewers have said is meandering. Cronenberg stole a march on everyone in 1983 with Videodrome, but by 1999 an awful lot of people had caught up. Is it a problem if a David Cronenberg film is light, fun, and relatively inconsequential? Or, and I'm not completely sure I buy this myself, could eXistenZ possibly be about something that no other reviewer I've come across has addressed? Be warned, at the end of this video we will be dabbling very, very amateurishly in the world of existential philosophy, because this is eXistenZ.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
From the back of the DVD case, the near future, eXistenZ is the ultimate game, brainchild of the hip, hyper and sexually alluring Allegra Geller. Once downloaded via a bioport implanted into the player's spine, eXistenZ promises an experience that will shatter forever the line between fantasy and reality. At its launch, armed fanatics burst in, determined to destroy the game and its creator. Forced to run for her life, Allegra's sole ally is a young security guard, played by Jude Law. Together they seek refuge in the only place the gaming goddess feels safe, the world where existence ends and eXistenZ begins. By the end of the 90s, eXistenZ was sharing the swimming pool with films like The Matrix, Dark City, Strange Days, all concerned with this notion of Y2 chaos, the end of the world, virtual realms, the millennium. For the first time since 1983 and Videodrome, he was also working from a script based solely on an original idea of his, and maybe that in and of itself set the bar of expectations ridiculously high for a film that seems to be much more playful than anything else he'd produced before, although I'd argue that Naked Lunch on closer inspection could quite easily be considered a comedy. He's back to his shady corporations and weird political movements, agents, double agents, invented jargon, strange bioorganisms, and frankly gloriously ludicrous character names. I'm not entirely sure, but he may just be having a little fun at his own expense as well. eXistenZ supposes a near future world where games developers are the new rock and roll stars and virtual reality games are hewing now closer and closer to real world experiences that an awful lot of people find an extension of their own lives or an improvement of their own lives in the virtual realm against what is considered to be real. And these create the wonderful factions that Cronenberg has delighted me with since really Scanners. He's excellent at coming up with strange and weird corporations and political movements. We get all of that again in eXistenZ. There are the two games companies, the rivals Antenna Research and Cortical Systematics, whilst against both of them is a very militant pro-reality movement who believes the games from both companies are devaluing reality and they are willing to kill to keep it real. One of the things that will guarantee to age a future tech film badly is their representation of future tech. When we talked about Videodrome, we talked about the fact that the tech is really, although all of the tech in Videodrome is completely obsolete, so the film itself should be obsolete, the technology is window dressing. As it is here, he's not seriously attempting to predict future technology. He's having fun with it. So the game systems that we know now just bear no resemblance to these fleshy, they're more organic than hardware gaming pods that look a little bit like wriggling stomach sacs that have umbilical cords that plug straight into the bioports that are holes punched into the base of your spine so they can connect with your nervous system. And basically I imagine that the game runs in your brain. And as with anything Cronenbergian, where there is something biological, there is disease and mutation. And infection here plays a key part of the film. Cross-infection, the fear of viral contamination, which really do, I think, drill down into the Y2K panic at the time. But you have your virus now is a weirdly sort of biological computer virus, I guess. If the game pod gets sick and it's plugged into your nervous system, reality gets sick. The game you're playing, the virtual world that you're in, starts to degrade and get sick. There's also a fantastic notion towards the end of the film that the intentions or the subconscious intentions of the game players can actually affect the game as well. So a sick mind can infect the game realm, and the two-way street there is it's not really mined for philosophy in the same way that The Fly has sort of meditations on disease, identity, and the body in it. This is all played for fun, really, and eXistenZ is fun. And as with other Cronenberg movies, it's also a little bit kinky. If we know anything about David, it's that he likes his sex with a few kinks in it. I don't think that the man eats an awful lot of vanilla ice cream. So the sort of fleshy organic game pods have sort of like instead of buttons, they have nipples that you have to sort of flick the nipples, or maybe sort of like weirdly fleshy clitoris type things that you have to stimulate the pod into activity. You literally have to turn it on. They're connected to us with umbilical cords that plug into our backs, those little bioports at the base of our spine. Look, Cronenberg is as Cronenberg does. It doesn't take an amazing leap of imagination to see them as little anuses that have to have things poked into them. They need to be lubed up, either with little lube sticks, or just a nice little wet finger, or you lick the end of the umbilicus before you stick that in. There's lots of body penetration going on, and it's, again, I cannot believe that it's not played for laughs. I can't believe David Cronenberg is clearly laughing at his own expense and ours. Everyone who is a fan of Cronenberg really should be in on this joke. And so if we're talking about kinky, I'm gonna have to hold my hands up and just admit that for whatever reason, once Jennifer Jason Leigh goes into the game of eXistenZ, and then later on when she's got that umbi cord between her toes, she is sexy as all hell in this movie. I don't think Jennifer Jason Leigh's ever been sexier. As we've all come to expect from films that dabble in virtual realms or dream realities, characters start to question whether the real world is just another illusion. The Matrix sequels, strangely, didn't go there, and I was always sure that they would, because the film representation of Zion, the real world, was so goddamn boring. Inception, much later on, became the poster child for layers of reality. eXistenZ likes to lay down hints in the form of visual cues and seemingly strange line deliveries about its particular different circles of reality. The obvious rear projection of the backgrounds outside the car when Ted helps Allegra flee her would-be assassins is a clear indicator right up front that the real world may not be quite so real. There are many shots of characters feeling objects near them, testing the sort of fidelity of the world around them, maybe to check that it's the real world, or check to see how real the virtual world seems. There are some odd character choices, to be sure, and the first time you watch eXistenZ, you might find yourself idly wondering why Jude Law chose to say a certain line in such a clunking way, or why Willem Dafoe put such an odd pause into his line delivery. Multiple viewings unearth a ridiculously precise set of signifiers, which are all designed to signpost exactly where the virtual rabbit hole is at any given time. Keep an eye on Jude Law's hair, because his hairstyle is also a signifier as to what different virtual level of reality he's on at any given time. Full props have to go to his long-term collaborator in production design, Carol Spear, and she really needs to take a bow for this movie. Transitions from the real world into that of the gaming world are done so subtly, sometimes with a camera movement and just a melding of sets, pieces from one reality sort of placed and jumbled and start to accrue in the real world set. And she does guide you down the levels with her design. It's subtle, to be sure. There's a lot of matte colouring going on. A lot of things absent from these worlds. And with each new game within a game, if you like, or virtual reality within a virtual reality, the sub-levels become stiffer, a little bit more cartoony, a little bit weirder each and every time. The film will take your hand and it will guide you along, but the clues it gives and the cues you have to look out for, you won't really have a character sit down and tell you what's going on. You won't have a scene like you did at the start of Inception, where Leonardo DiCaprio sits down and explains exactly how everything works. By the way, are you paying attention, audience? Because you're going to need to know this by the end of the film. Now, I've read some reviews that say that David Cronenberg is talking about the danger of gaming and virtual realms accruing significance over our real lives. How would he know 20 years later the kind of digital online presences we would all have, the multiple personas we would have? I really don't think he was actually talking about anything as boring as that at all. Ultimately, eXistenZ is not talking about virtual worlds, it's talking about our world. Except with the notion of game urges in eXistenZ, things that your character, you, have to say or have to do in order to progress the game. You do wonder whether you would let some of your id closer to the surface if you knew or thought you knew that you weren't in the real world. Maybe though, just maybe, David Cronenberg is having a much more esoteric chuckle at our expense. Consider the two VR games under consideration. There's eXistenZ, and outside of eXistenZ, there's Transcendence. Now, please forgive me whilst I read you some philosophy stuff that I cribbed from Wikipedia. Dasein, bound to have mispronounced that. Dasein is a German word that means being there or presence, and is often translated into English with the word existence. It's the fundamental concept of existential philosophy of Martin Heidegger. Heidegger uses the expression Dasein to refer to the experience of being that is particular to human beings. Thus, it's a form of being that is aware of and must confront such issues as personhood, mortality, and the dilemma or paradox of living in relationship with other humans whilst being ultimately alone with oneself. Heidegger considered that language, everyday curiosity, logical systems, and common beliefs obscure Dasein's nature from itself. Authentic choice means turning away from the collective world of them to face Dasein, one's individuality, one's own limited lifespan, one's own being. Heidegger thus intended the concept of Dasein to provide a stepping stone in the questioning of what it means to be, to have one's own being, one's own death, one's own truth. Now, from Karl Jaspers, another existential philosopher, the term Dasein meant existence in its most minimal sense, the realm of objectivity and science, in opposition to what Jaspers called eXistenZ, spelt exactly the same as the title of this movie. eXistenZ to him was the realm of authentic being. Authenticity is a concept in psychology. Authenticity is the degree to which an individual's actions are congruent with their beliefs and desires despite external pressures. Think again of those game urges, the things that Jude Law's character has to say and do against his own will. And then think about him at the Chinese restaurant, where the game means for him to shoot someone. And he really doesn't want to, but he kind of sort of comes round to the idea he kind of really does want to shoot someone. The conscious self is seen as coming to terms with being in a material world and with encountering external forces, pressures and influences which are very different from and other than itself. Ted Pikel in the movie says, "I don't like it here, I don't know what's going on. We're both stumbling around together in this unformed world whose rules and objectives are largely unknown, seemingly indecipherable or even possibly non-existent, always on the verge of being killed by forces that we don't understand." This is existential philosophy and existential existence. Ted Pikel is having an existential crisis in the middle of eXistenZ. In his work Philosophy, Jaspers gave his view of the history of philosophy and introduced his major themes. Beginning with modern science and empiricism, Jaspers points out that as we question reality, we confront borders that an empirical or scientific method cannot simply transcend. At this point, the individual faces a choice: sink into despair and resignation, or take a leap of faith towards what Jaspers calls transcendence. In making this leap, individuals confront their own limitless freedom, which Jaspers calls eXistenZ, and can finally experience authentic existence. Ted Pikel again, "I'm feeling a little disconnected from my real life, kind of losing touch with the texture of it, do you know what I mean? I actually think there's an element of psychosis here." Could David Cronenberg be ruminating with his tongue in his cheek about some of these notions of existential philosophy, eXistenZ and transcendence, pushing against the constrictures of the real world and living in the world of them, others, as an individual being, trying to live an authentic life true to my desires, urges and nature against a world that is trying to force me into a narrow box of conformity that is oftentimes a huge machinery against my own authentic self. Ted Pikel's struggle may not be to come to terms with these virtual existences, but that his ultimate struggle may be to come to terms with what those gaming experiences, eXistenZ and transcendence, allow him to release from himself. These notions that he pushes down his authentic being by the end of the film is very, very, very different to how he is at the start of the film. Has Ted Pikel achieved transcendence? Is he living eXistenZ, his true, authentic self, by the end of the movie? Who knows? It's a hell of a fun time finding out. After eXistenZ, which is kind of like his final hurrah to the weird and wonderful, he does not make, or has not yet made, films that root right back down to his origins. I wish him well on his journey, but since this is ostensibly a horror channel, I won't be reviewing any more of David Cronenberg's movies after eXistenZ. What I will do is link to a review I did a long time back about his novel, a few years old now, called Consumed. If you are itching for more of that older David Cronenberg, I highly recommend the novel Consumed, and click on the link to find me talking about that. It's great fun. But now David Cronenberg's done and dusted, I think it's hammer time.